Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to join with us in that show today, our fourth podcast. We are very happy today because we have a very important guest. Christopher Segi is our immigration and real estate law attorney, and we are going to share with you today a Q&A question frequently you have when we are talking about many legal process in Panama. Then, thank you very much, Christopher, to be here with us.
Thank you very much for you ladies inviting me today. It's a pleasure being here. Hopefully, we can resolve some concerns that foreigners and expat interested relocating in Panama, investing in Panama, have, and hopefully they can get some answers on their questions, right?
And we do have an interesting dynamic today. We put all the questions here, so we're gonna,
We're gonna start.
yes.
These are the most frequently questions that you make to us in our different podcasts. Then we are going to resolve that questions today. And for start that questions, we're gonna read the first one. What taxes and closing costs should I expect if I will invest here in Panama?
Okay. As general law, when you go ahead and purchase a property in Panama, the seller pays 2% property transaction and 3% capital gains if there's gains, right? Now, the buyer is in charge of paying notary fees, registration fees with the public registry, and everything related to inscription fees, right? Law quotes, you pay $1, $3 per each $1,000 your property is worth. So based on that, you can do your math. Let's say a property 300,000, right? We'll be paying more or less like $1,000 in inscription tax plus notary plus whatever expense there is at the public registry, and each party, seller and buyer, pays their attorney fees.
Okay, perfect. Second question, Maka.
How safe is Panama for foreigner real estate investors?
Well, Panama is very, very safe. And why is it so? Because we have a stable currency. We have the US dollar. Nothing with our neighbors, nothing against our neighbors, but they don't have a stable currency like we do. So investing here in Panama is quite safe, number one on that. And we have a good banking system, big developers. So it's a safe place to invest.
Wonderful.
Okay, I have
Wendy?
another one here. Can I buy property remotely without ever visiting Panama?
Well, you can. I've seen it quite often. Nationalities that have a limit to come into Panama, for example, Chinese, Indians, normally those are the ones who will do that kind of path, right? They will do an
Sure.
investment. I've seen brokers, realtors do a virtual go around the property.
Of course.
There's a lot of banks that offer online opening bank accounts, so after doing a Zoom call, a video conference with the bank, and proving your source of funds, your origin of your funds, you shouldn't have any kind of inconvenience on purchasing a property from abroad.
Good.
Okay, wonderful. Second round now. That's a very interesting question because many of our investors have that idea when you buy a property, you are focused to do this. And listen, can I legally rent my property?
You can legally rent your property here in Panama being a foreigner. You're not required to have a PR, permanent resident, or a provisional resident to be able to rent your property, either to rent. You as a foreigner can also rent property. So that's why Panama is attractive, because one of the requirements, there's no requirement like you need to be permanent resident to purchase or to rent property here.
That's very important. In a little question, in addition, there, Christopher, talking about taxes. If the people is from example US and they start to rent, you remember the first 11,000.
Yeah, Panama.
Explain
Panama
that
in our tax code, the first 11,000 are tax free, right? So if you're renting your property, let's say in $1,000, you will have to hire an accountant and do the math, because the first 11 will be tax free, and then after that, you can deduct like HOA, attorney's fees, accountant fees. So then at the very end of the day, you're going to pay 15% of your profits. Okay.
Well, this is continuing that line of thought. Is Panama really a tax haven?
Well, just a little joke. We shouldn't be saying that on camera. But Panama is not a heaven, but our laws do quote that we have a territorial tax code. What does that mean? For example, let's say a couple, right? Mom and dad, they come to Panama with their kids, two kids. Their kids are here in school. Um, let's say the father has a business in any country in the world and it's generating them a cash flow or money on a monthly basis or annually, right? Let's say dividends once a year. That money that comes into Panama is tax free. That's why Panama is so attractive for foreigners. Because if you earn $100,000 outside Panama, you're not required to file taxes and to make a payment based on taxes here in this country. Let's say that's the way the father works. But let's say his wife is sitting in his living room, in the living room of the house where they work, and she has an online business. She's selling makeup on the other side of the world. Whatever income she's making, she's also not paying taxes in this country. Now, every nationality, they do have to reply back to their country based on their laws, right? Specifically Americans, Canadians, people from New Zealand, what I see on a daily basis, you do have to comply back to your country. But here in Panama, the law is territorial.
Wonderful.
Okay. How can I make sure the property has a clean title, and also how our public register works?
So, like the word says, right? It's public. Anybody who has an online access, a username and password, you can register yourself in the public register, right? And then, for example, every property in Panama has a folio number or finca number, right?
Yes.
With that number and the location code, you can exclusively get the label of that property, and you can check who's the owner. Is there any liens?
All
Is
the
there any
details.
encumbrances? Is there a
What is
mortgage with a
happening?
bank? Things like that. And that's what's public legally,
Exactly.
right? Now, what do I tell clients? If you're going to go ahead and buy a second-hand property, right, a used property, I can only see up to the legality, right? I can see any debts, any mortgages, but I do recommend hiring an architect, an engineer, go ahead and do a proper inspection, go ahead and do an appraisal, and then sit down and negotiate.
With a correct advisor.
For sure, and the correct attorney. You need to have a team to be able to do the smart and correct moves here in Panama.
Investments. Exactly. Well, the third round it's coming, and let's see which is the next question. Can foreigners legally own property in Panama?
Yeah, foreigners.
Very easy.
And it's in our codes, right? In our law, foreigners can own property in this country, and most important, they have the same right as a Panamanian. And the fact, if you end up in a legality issue, you have the same right as me as Panamanian to go to the courthouse as a foreigner does.
Following that, what is the legal process of buying property in Panama?
So the legal process, basically, from the moment you retain your attorney should do a due diligence on the property, right? If it's under a corporation, see who's the board of directors, who's the shareholder, request a copy of the shareholder's share certificate to start. If it's under a personal name, it's a little bit more easier to be able to see if there's no encumbrances. There could be a probate process, there could be a lien, there could be a mortgage. After you've figured out the steps, if it's a cash payment and there's no mortgage, it's a very straightforward process, right?
Okay.
We can do certified check at the notary office. We can do a promise to purchase letter issued from a bank. There are several ways to protect buyer and seller. Depending on who I am representing, I will for sure take more care on the side I'm representing, right? That he's never exposed and he's always safe to move forward.
Yeah.
But depending on the complex of the case, then we have to sit down, do a checklist, check that everything's good. Then we get everything on legal deed. We submit it to the public registry. And then somebody inside house, basically called as a qualificator, he will go ahead and review the file. If everything's good, he will go and register the property, do the transfer, and we're good to go. For sure, taxes have to be paid before we show receipts to the notary. There are steps that we have to go one by one. But it's a quite easy process when there's a cash buyer and there's no mortgage involved.
No work.
You already answered my question.
Oh, I've already
So
answered.
yeah, how do I safely transfer money to buy property in Panama?
Well, with that, I'm very, very careful. What I tell my personal clients who come to me, I get clients who come to me that they've spoken before with brokers, or they speak with me after the brokers, right? So if you're working with a big, big developer, and let's not mention names, but we know which ones are the big developers here.
We can mention you before.
You can go ahead. If it's a big developer, you can go ahead and wire the funds directly to the developer. Now, if you're buying a second house property, I always recommend to keep the funds in custody, right? Like a certified check at the notary, or a promise to purchase letter from the bank. Basically, the letter, what it's saying is saying, hey, dear seller, as soon as the property is under the name of the buyer, I will go ahead and redeem this letter into cash, right? And the other one, the certified check at the notary, is you do a custody agreement with the notary, and the notary won't release that check until the property isn't into the name of the buyer. So it's a way everybody can be safe.
Okay, that's a very important vision for that question. And the other round four or frequently asked questions are, let's see, what legal documents should I never sign without an attorney?
Well,
Very
there's many.
important.
There's many. There's
Very
many
important.
related. There's many related to what you shouldn't sign without an attorney, but based on in real estate transaction, like figure this out in life. What's going to be your biggest investment in life? Maybe it's just going to be your house. The house where you're going to live is maybe going to be the biggest investment you do in your life. So you have to be very careful on how you proceed, right? So signing a document, normally with developers, you get a very one-sided contract, right? It's like signing with insurance, banks, and developers. It's a little bit one-sided.
The client have not too much.
They don't have too much to options.
Yes.
But you have a little bit to move
To
around.
dispute.
If you're coming in and paying cash, you can make the developer, agree to some terms and conditions that normally they won't in a different way, right? But if it's a second-hand property, you have more options to negotiate with the seller and to decide what you're going to put there, and everything's safe. But for sure, you should never sign something that binds you, makes it binding, without a proper attorney going ahead and review it. And I mean an attorney who's well seasoned in immigration and real estate, because like you were mentioning, that sometimes you buy a property here in Panama and you won't be able to qualify for residency because you bought it in the wrong way,
Yes.
So
Exactly.
that's very important, having somebody seasoned into it.
We as an advisor, we have many histories with people that choose to avoid to use an attorney, and could be a big headache in the future, right?
Yeah, because sometimes they also, they already bought a property, but they were planning to do something, or they think about doing the immigration process after. So then they come to you,
Yeah.
and you need to understand how to make it work.
Again, I deal with the city, a lot with the city, but I deal a lot with Bocas del Toro, Chiriquí, those areas as well. So, and it's very common between foreigners, right? So foreigners come here to this country, they sit down in a bar or restaurant, they meet the neighbor, right? And they're like, "Hi, how are you? How did you end up here?" "Oh, I want to buy your property," right?
And
Because they met
make
themselves
the
there.
deal
They make
by
themselves
themselves.
in the deal, but then they're in a mess, right? Because they try to place it the same as the States and Canada, or from the country, thinking that we have the same law. And unfortunately we don't have the same kind of law. So very important and crucial to speak with a broker and to an attorney.
Okay.
What happens to my property if I pass away?
Well, if you pass away and the property is under your personal name, or a company that you haven't properly done a living will, it will have to go through a probate. Here in Panama, there's two kind of probates. There's one that with a living will that existed, and another one without a living will. Okay. The good thing, if you have a living will in this country, that you've placed it at a notary office, it gives the judge a little bit easy path on what you wanted, right? And he's going to always try to commit to what your living will says when it's inside law, right? It has to make sense for him to move forward. Now, if there's no living will, then you need to go through a court process and transfer that It takes time. It takes money. You know, it's
another completely different process.
It's a process that can take 6 months up to a year, more or less. Now there are ways you can try to bypass the probate. You know, if you do what is called estate planning before, and you have everything set in place through foundations, corporations, there are ways that you can avoid trying to do that kind of complicated process.
Complicated for
But it's not automatically. That's what I want foreigners to know, that it's not automatically that you show up and things are done. It's not that way.
Maybe explain what can someone do to make sure
what you
that
suggest to do trouble with that.
if you want to blind like armor your property if you're coming here as an investor.
So for example, a foundation or a corporation gives you the structure that you can transfer things up. Somebody has to be in charge, right? You will need somebody to take, because you're not going to be physically here. But I recommend always leave a living will. Even if you have a foundation or corporation, leave a living will.
Right.
And then in the case for the banks, nowadays banks, you can place somebody as a beneficiary, right? So if you pass away, you just have to walk into the bank with a death certificate and show that beneficiary letter. And 10 days after, you have a certified check under your name, you know? I've seen it, I've done it.
Good. Buying property helped me obtain residence in Panama.
Buying property in Panama does gain a residency, but it's not automatically, right? And it depends on your budget. If you buy something for 150, you won't qualify. You know, it has to be over 200,000 for certain nationalities and over 300 for others. But for sure, an investment here through real estate gains you permanent residence. Some go through provisional 2 years, but they all end up in a permanent residence.
Okay.
Wonderful. And we have the last questions, I believe. Let me see. Okay, interesting. What's one legal mistake that could cost you thousands of dollars in your experience? Which
So like I was showing you before we started, like I met some clients in Boca del Toro, a couple. They bought a $300,000 property in Bocas, and they wanted to do the Friendly Nation visa. But when they came to me, they registered in a way that they registered under both names, right? So it doesn't qualify you that way. So you have to be very careful how you register the property to be able to gain a residency. Now, if it's just an investment,
It's okay.
it doesn't really matter, right? But
which
if you
is your
want,
purpose or your
which is your purpose? So that's why you need to sit down with an attorney first to see what you want to get done. Now,
Exactly.
it's always good to do it in a way. Maybe you don't need residency now, but maybe in 5 years you do. You know, so it's always very, very good to consider. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, right? But you need to have, like I said, your ducks in a row and everything crystal clear. Also, another one, the way you register, sometimes you could be, if you're doing it in a wrong way, you could be paying thousands and thousands of property tax that you could have avoided if you did the proper structuring before going ahead and purchasing.
I think you already answered this because it's what are the biggest legal mistakes foreigner investor make that you haven't said?
Yes. Like the
Listen,
steps.
like I see foreigners do mistakes because the lack of knowledge, right? And assuming things are the way it is in their country. But for example, I tell people, like I said, you have to hire an attorney who's well seasoned in the topic, that you can see he can fluently have a conversation with you about real estate and immigration, right? He can show that he knows what he's doing, right? If you come to me and you hire me for something that I don't handle, you know, I would honestly tell you I'm not the guy. Maybe I know someone, because I know what I'm good in. You know, I'm not going to be exploring with somebody's investment or what his goals, right? I'm playing around with his goals, and that's not professional. But some of the mistakes are, I've seen Americans that they hire attorneys who don't speak fluent English, you know? Having a language barrier is even more complicated, you know?
For some friend that doesn't know about real estate.
Mostly it's like that. Yeah, I
And
know
when-
this attorney. This
Exactly.
And, that,
And when we are talking to them, to the lawyer, we are explaining something that they doesn't know, and they tell to the client something different.
Yeah.
So it's really important to specific contact a lawyer like you that have the experience in that.
And I see it a lot. I see it a lot of these kind of cases. And Panama, what I really love about Panama is that Panama has a very competitive market, you know. Outside, There's other very good brokers, and there's other very, very good attorneys, you know, that I see them every day when I'm at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I can see 2 or 3 big attorneys, you know, just the same as doing the same thing. We've been doing it for the last 7, 10 years, and we're still going to do it for the next 10 years, you know.
Sure.
So after you do something for 10 years, there's nobody who can tell you this is wrong. You already know the insides and out, you know. So you need somebody well seasoned in the topic.
Well,
Of course.
we're super grateful with you, Christopher, for taking your time to resolve all of that frequently asked questions that our clients have. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, ladies. And thank you to share with us that interesting podcast. See you the next time, and follow us if you have
Additional questions for Christian, please comment or send.
Yeah,
Sorry,
change
Christopher.
my name. But again, ladies, thank you very much for being here. It's been a pleasure. You're always welcome to include me in these kind of things. I really like to share my knowledge with foreigners. Relocating is not an easy step. It's not just buying a plane ticket. It's more than just that. So take your time, so you don't get cold feet. All right? Take care. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye bye.